She was an orphan. She had no royal blood. She lived in a foreign land. Yet God placed her on a throne to save an entire nation. The story of Queen Esther is one of courage, wisdom, sacrifice, and divine timing. It's a powerful reminder that even when God seems silent, today we uncover the extraordinary story of Esther, how an ordinary young woman became a queen and changed history forever. Esther's story begins in the most unexpected of places. She was a Jewish orphan, living in Persia under the rule of the mighty King Xerxes. Raised by her loving cousin Mordecai, her life was simple, marked by obedience and a quiet, humble spirit. She had no power, no political influence, and certainly no idea of the incredible destiny that awaited her. She was just an ordinary girl, living in the shadows of a vast empire. Her world was small and predictable. But it's often in these quiet, seemingly insignificant places that God begins to write his greatest stories. God was preparing her, even in the silence, for a moment that would determine the fate of her entire people. Then the stage of history began to shift. Queen Vashti, Xerxes' wife, was dramatically removed from her position, leaving the throne empty. The king, in his search for a new queen, commanded that the most beautiful young women in the kingdom be brought to the palace. Among them was Esther. Can you imagine the fear and uncertainty she must have felt? Being taken from her home and thrust into the competitive, high-stakes world of the royal court? Yet something about her stood out. Her grace and humility won the hearts of everyone she met, from the king's officials to the other women. Following Mordecai's wise counsel, she kept her Jewish identity a secret, a detail that would become critically important later on. Out of all the women from across the 127 provinces of Persia, it was Esther who captured the king's heart. He chose her, and she was crowned queen. On the surface, it might look like a fairy tale, a stroke of incredible luck, but this was no accident. This was divine positioning. God, in his infinite wisdom, had orchestrated every single step. He had moved an orphan from obscurity to the palace, placing her in the one position of influence that could save her people from the disaster that was looming just over the horizon. Esther was exactly where she needed to be, at exactly the right time, even if she didn't know it yet. Just as Esther settled into her new life, a dark shadow began to fall over the kingdom. A man named Haman, a high-ranking official, was promoted by the king to a position of immense power. Haman was consumed by pride and demanded that everyone bow down to him. But Mordecai, Esther's cousin, refused. As a Jew, he would only bow to God. This act of defiance ignited a furious, vengeful hatred in Haman. His wounded pride quickly morphed into a genocidal rage, not just against Mordecai, but against all Jewish people throughout the Persian Empire. Fueled by this hatred, Haman went to the king with a wicked plan. He twisted the truth, painting the Jews as a threat to the kingdom. He offered a massive bribe and convinced King Xerxes to sign a decree ordering the complete annihilation of every Jewish man, woman, and child on a specific day. The law was sealed with the king's ring, making it irreversible. A death sentence had been passed on an entire nation. Despair and mourning spread like a plague through the Jewish communities. Hope seemed utterly and completely lost. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he sent a desperate message to Queen Esther, pleading with her to go before the king and beg for the lives of her people. This was the moment everything had been leading to. But it was a terrifying request. According to Persian law, anyone who approached the king in his inner court without being summoned would be put to death. unless the king extended his golden scepter. Esther was afraid, and rightfully so. Her life was on the line. She hesitated, sending word back to Mordecai about the immense danger. But Mordecai's reply was one of the most powerful and pivotal challenges in history. He said, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Those words ignited a fire in Esther's soul. She understood her position wasn't for comfort or privilege, it was for purpose. She chose courage over fear, faith over safety. She sent a message back to Mordecai, asking him to gather all the Jews in the city to fast and pray for her for 3 days. She and her attendants would do the same. Then, with a resolve that could only come from God, she declared, "I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." This is the heart of true faith, acting with courage in the face of uncertainty, trusting God with the outcome. With the prayers of her people behind her, Esther put on her royal robes and took the longest walk of her life into the inner court of the king, uninvited. She stood there, her heart pounding, waiting for her fate. The king saw her, and instead of anger, his heart was moved. He extended the golden scepter. She had found favor. Her life was spared. But Esther didn't rush. She acted with incredible wisdom and patience. Instead of blurting out her request, she invited the king and Haman to a private banquet, and then to a second banquet the next day. She was setting the stage for the perfect moment. At that second banquet, the king again asked what she desired, promising to give her anything, up to half the kingdom. This was it. With all her courage, Esther exposed Haman's vile plot, revealing her own Jewish identity. She said, "I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king was shocked, then enraged, when he discovered that the man responsible was his trusted advisor, Haman, who was sitting right there at the banquet. His fury knew no bounds. In a stunning and dramatic reversal of fortune, the king ordered that Haman be executed on the very gallows he had proudly built for Mordecai. God had turned the tables. A new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves. And what was meant to be a day of destruction became a day of glorious victory. The legacy of Queen Esther echoes through millennia. It's a story that's unique because God is never mentioned by name. There are no burning bushes or parting seas. He never speaks directly. And yet, His presence, His divine providence, is woven into every single detail of the story. You can see His hand guiding Esther from an orphan's home to a queen's throne. You can feel His timing in the sleepless night of a king, the courage of a young woman, and the dramatic downfall of an enemy. Esther's bravery didn't just save a nation. It gave birth to the joyous festival of Purim, celebrated by Jewish people to this day. It's a vibrant, living reminder that God is a God of deliverance, who can turn mourning into dancing, and who works powerfully on behalf of His people, even when He seems silent. The story of Esther isn't just an ancient tale. It's a timeless message for you and me. It reminds us that God's plans are perfect, and He places ordinary people in specific places for extraordinary purposes at exactly the right time. You might feel small. You might feel unseen or unprepared for the challenges you face. But what if God has positioned you right where you are, with your unique story, your unique skills, for such a time as this. Be encouraged. Your life has a divine purpose. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, please like and subscribe for more content that builds your faith.